Evening, everybody. Good evening, folks. Pastor Mark Olson here from Faith Lutheran in Bagley, and our Bible study continues. Our final and concluding 8th session. Sorry, I'm starting a little bit late tonight. I had a Pathways Bible Camp meeting that ran a little bit long, so I apologize. About 15 minutes later than our normal starting time. Over the past 8 weeks, 9 including tonight because we weren't able to meet last week, we've been following a story of famine during our own time of pandemic. We have been following a story of racial strife, a story of a Moabite and Moabites versus the Jews, even at a time when our country is facing racial strife. And so this book of Ruth, this love story across cultures, this story of gritty courage during a time of famine and loss, is very life-giving, at least for me, and an incredible story of hope and resiliency, human resiliency in the face of unexpected and unforeseen tragedy. I hope studying the book of Ruth has challenged and encouraged you too as we face these uncertain times as well. I want to begin tonight with a little bit of a review, actually from 2 weeks ago. Some important things that happened towards the close of the third chapter, or really throughout the third chapter of the book of Ruth. First thing to review is the interesting conversation when Naomi tells Ruth to bathe and put on your finest garments and go and lie with Boaz on the threshing room floor. Last time we gathered, I said it may seem awkward or strange, but in the time of the Me Too movement and so much positive direction in terms of awful history of sexual violence against women, that women are standing up and saying, "Me too. I've experienced that." It isn't, I think, too far afield to talk about sexual consent in under the larger umbrella of what's going on in the story of Ruth. We recall from the third chapter that when Ruth bathes and she goes at night to the threshing room floor, really in a role that would often be taken up by possibly a prostitute. We know that Boaz has been drinking. He had the power in the relationship. No one would know what he might do to Ruth in the middle of the night. And of course, he didn't live in the 21st century. He didn't live at a time of the Me Too movement. This was not a no means no and a yes means yes world. Yet Boaz, as a gentle man, asks a question rather than making a demand of Ruth. When Ruth awakens him or startles him and uncovers his feet, to use that euphemism, Boaz says, "Who are you?" And then Ruth responds in a way that is agile. It is an act of her determination. Again, Naomi told her what to do, but she didn't tell Ruth what to say when she encountered Boaz on that threshing room floor. And so it is Ruth's ingenuity, it's Ruth's initiative to respond. And so she says, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your cloak over your servant, for you are next of kin." Spread your cloak over the one as you are now the Goel. You have the right to redeem as next of kin the relationship with Ruth, who has lost her husband. That's an important term, again, to review. Goel in Hebrew would also, as much as it means next of kin, it would mean redeemer. I know we've gone over this a couple of other times, but just once again, Deuteronomy 25 lays out that cultural role of being a redeemer of a widowed woman who does not have a husband to provide an heir. Deuteronomy 25. When brothers reside together and one of them dies and has no son, the wife of the deceased shall not be married outside the family to a stranger. Her husband's brothers shall go in to her, take her in marriage in performing the duty of a husband's brother to her, and the firstborn from whom she bears shall succeed to the name of the deceased brother, so that his name shall not be blotted out of Israel. The firstborn from whom she bears shall succeed to the name of the deceased brother. Think about that, and we'll get back to that a little bit later. Really, the other tender moment in our review in that exchange on that threshing room floor occurs when Ruth must again speak for herself and her intentions. When she summons the courage to say, "Spread the cloak over your servant," Dr. Sekenfeld writes in her commentary. These words make quite certain that Ruth has in mind a change in the relationship between herself and Boaz. She's a bold woman. She's not afraid to ask for what she wants or what she feels she needs. Spread out your cloak over your servant. Although her language is symbolic, even veiled, it's a reference to marriage. It would have been clear to the ancient Israelite hearer. The term cloak is literally in Hebrew wing, as in the wing of a bird. One use of the word wing idiom refers to the warmth and the protection of the Hebrew marriage bond. Ruth has not forgotten Boaz's prayer either, that Boaz prayed at the very beginning of their first encounter, that first day when Ruth went out gleaning, probably 6 to 8 weeks in the past. She's remembered and cherished Boaz's prayer that God might place God's wing of protection over. May the Lord protect you. Again, Dr. Sekenfeld. Now, Ruth, in effect, invites Boaz to make good on the prayer he made early on her behalf, providing some measure of reward or refuge under God's wings through his own action by marrying her, end quote. Ruth is acting with agility and with tact. She is not forcing Boaz into a relationship or forcing herself upon her, thereby entrapping him. She too, in her own way, is asking for a prayerful consent. May the Lord place his wing over me through you, that Boaz might become her husband, her protector. And again, in that Hebrew word, goel, redeemer, the one with the right to redeem. Both, I think, Boaz and Ruth are so commendable here because they show this great care and affection for each other. Boaz says to Ruth, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. This last instance of your loyalty is better than the first." The first instance of loyalty was that pledge that Ruth makes in chapter 1, where you go, I go, where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people. Your God shall be my God. That's the first sign of loyalty. The second sign of loyalty is particularly touching for Boaz. He says, "You have not gone after younger men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, do not be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask. I will become your husband," is what he's saying. "For all the assembly of my people know that you are a worthy woman." That promise has been given. I will do for you whatever you will ask. But there is, again, that one other important detail. There's this other guy as we enter into tonight's readings. There's a next of kin whose place in the inheritance of the field of Elimelech, whose relationship or inheritance, his genealogy to Naomi and to Elimelech and Elimelech's line is closer than Boaz's is. So that sticky situation has to yet be resolved. But now, though it is true that I am a near kinsman, there is another kinsman more closer related than I. Remain this night, and in the morning, if he will act as next of kin for you, good, let him do so. If he is not willing to act as next of kin for you, then, as the Lord lives, I will act, Boaz says, I will act as your next of kin. Lie down until the morning. Again, Boaz um, provides protection for Ruth so that she doesn't have to wander back through the night, knowing that there are other people perhaps in the field that have been drinking. And so, again, he provides the role of protector for her. That gets us to tonight's reading, the fourth chapter. In Diane Jacobson's commentary, she writes about in chapter 4, the venue changes from the threshing floor to the surrounding fields, and the surrounding fields. That's been the setting for the previous two chapters. To the Bethlehem city gate. The gate functions as the ancient Israelite courthouse. 10 male elders gather and act as judge and jury, and the rest of the gathered community acts as witnesses to the proceedings. And they are just a wonderful group of witnesses, as we'll hear in a little bit. Let's begin actually at verse 2. Then Boaz took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit down here, and they sat down. He then said to the next of kin, that one who is the closer in the relationship, the genealogy to Elimelech, he says, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our kinsman Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it. In the presence of those sitting here, and in the presence of the elders of my people. And if you redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me, so that I may know. For there is no one prior to you to redeem it, no one prior nor closer in the relationship to Elimelech. And I come after you, Boaz says. And so the nearest next of kin, we never get the guy's name. The other guy, let's just call him that. The other guy says, I will redeem it. So he is making a claim to the land. Now, imagine the thoughts of Ruth and Naomi in this sudden, uncertain time. Imagine the roller coaster of their feelings. Ruth has made herself vulnerable to Boaz. The harvest season is over, and the benevolence and the care that the charity, really, if you will. We've talked about that, the difference between justice and charity. The charity that Boaz has extended is run out because the harvest season is over. There isn't anything left to glean. There isn't anything left that will sustain Naomi and Ruth beyond that night on the threshing room floor. And so she has tied herself to the hope that Boaz will marry her, made herself vulnerable to him. And this man who she has at least got to know and see over the course of that 6 to 8 week harvest has prayed for her. And the night before on the threshing floor protected her, did not violate her, and made her stay with him until the morning so it would be safe for her to leave and not be molested in the night. This man had said, do not be afraid. I will do for you whatever you ask. But Ruth has to be afraid because this stranger, this other guy, this next of kin who is in line before Boaz says, I will redeem Naomi's land. Does this mean that Rachel will be destitute or forgotten? Or will she have to marry a strange man who is not perhaps as kind or as gentle or as gentlemanly as Boaz? All of that seems to hang in the balance. And yet Boaz has one more card to play. Verse 5, then Boaz said to the man making the claim, the day you acquire the field from the hand of Naomi, you are also acquiring Ruth the Moabite. There's that tainted word again, that foreign woman, that strange widow of a dead man, a Moabite, Ruth. And you will you will be acquiring Ruth the Moabite and maintain the dead man's name on his inheritance. Okay. What does it mean? The dead man's inheritance? Well, this nearer next of kin, this Goel, this redeemer, is supposed to go into Ruth, have relations with her, and possibly produce another male heir. Verse 6. At this, the next of kin said, I cannot redeem it for myself without damaging my own inheritance. Take my right to redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it. Now, we don't have any outward saying that he's doing this because Ruth is a Moabite. It doesn't say that here. But there's another economic condition here. The damage that he refers to, the damage to the nearer next of kin, was that he might someday lose his inheritance to a male child born of Ruth, an heir that would take over the prospective next of kin's inheritance. And it's an economic risk that the nearer next of kin is not willing to make, while Boaz is willing to do that. It's really, at least on the outside, it looks like an economic or a familiar consideration. The text doesn't come out and say it, but it could also very well be that because Ruth is a Moabite, the racist view of the nearer next of kin is he's against marrying anybody other than a Jewish wife. And again, we've gone over this several times over the past few weeks. The biblical references to the animosity between Jews and Moabites. It's kind of interesting, this next section. Now, this was the custom of former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, one party took off a sandal. Just happen to have my flip-flops on here. Took off a sandal and gave it to the other. And this was a matter of testing in Israel. So when the next of kin said to Boaz, quiet for himself, he took off his sandal. Good thing you're watching from TV and not having to smell my feet as I take my sandal off. Strange local custom? No, it was actually part of the I always have a hard time saying the Deuteronomic Code. I'm probably not saying that right. Deuteronomy 25. Then the elders of his town shall summon him and speak to him. If he persists, saying, I have no desire to marry her, then his brother's wife shall go up to him in the presence of the elders, pull his sandal off his foot, spit in his face, and declare, this is what is done to the man who does not build up his brother's house. Throughout Israel, his family shall be known as, quote, the house of him whose sandal was pulled off. This guy voluntarily pulls off his sandal. He's not forced to, because Boaz is willing to be that next of kin. Boaz is willing to redeem, if you will, Ruth, and by extension to Ruth, redeem Naomi. Verses 9 and 10, I'm not going to go through those right now. You can do that in your own study. Boaz declares before the Bethlehem city his intention to claim Naomi's land, the land of Elimelech, and to marry Ruth. And then the witnesses chime in, and they are just awesome. Then all the people who were at the gate, along with the elders, said, we are witnesses. They're also people of faith, and so they break into prayer. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel, and Leah, matriarchs in the line of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. May Ruth be like Rachel and Leah. She's a Moabite. She's not supposed to have any kind of standing in the language and the genealogy of the Old Testament. But here the witnesses are saying, we want her elevated even to the high regard of the names of Rachel and Leah. Let Ruth's name be said in the same breath as theirs. May she be like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you produce children in Ephrathah and bestow a name in Bethlehem. And through the children that the Lord will give you by this young woman, may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. There's more on Tamar in the book of Genesis. That's a whole other Bible study that could be done on her and how she also makes a claim of next of kin to Judah, and then she gives birth to Perez, who is a part of that genealogy that leads us to tonight. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And when they came together, the Lord made her conceive, and she bore a son. The family line will continue. And the story that is salvation history through the Old Testament into the New will continue as well. Or a son. Then the women, get this is the women. Women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord who has not left you this day without next of kin." They're saying this to the grandma, to Naomi. "And may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has borne him." Ruth, the women of the village, the women of Bethlehem said, "Ruth is more to you, Naomi, than 7 sons." What is 7 in Scripture? 7 is the number of completion. Here is a foreign woman, a Moabite, who is more valuable to Naomi than if she had 7 sons of her own. Dr. Sekenfeld writes, Ruth is so much value to Naomi because everything that she has done from the first scene of the story until now has led to the possibility of the birth of this child of hope. It is Ruth's faithfulness, kindness, loyalty to Naomi, in a word, Ruth's hesed, that has led to this outcome. The placing of Ruth above the value of 7 sons gives the strongest possible cultural expression of her worth in a society that placed such great value upon male offspring. Ruth has grit. Ruth has an intestinal fortitude and a longing, loving willingness to bind herself to Naomi. Your Yahweh shall be my Yahweh. Your people shall be my people. And that is finally fulfilled here as she gives birth. Verse 16, worth the whole book. This verse. Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her bosom and became his nurse. Now, of course, she's grandma, and we don't understand this nursing in the sense of being a wet nurse. But in Hebrew, it would be the language of being the female caretaker of a child. Now, recall the bitter words of Naomi in chapter 1. Calm as she's arrived back in Bethlehem, and the people come out and they see her with this strange foreign Moabite woman, and they don't know what quite to make of it. And so they say, "Is this Naomi? Is this really Naomi?" And Naomi's reply to her friends 10 years later, her face weathered, her hair graying, her life, when she had left and gone forth to Moab, was so full of hope, with a husband and 2 sons. Now her life is empty. So she said, "Call me no longer Naomi. Call me Mara, For the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Naomi's empty arms are now full, full as she is a nurse to her grandson. Again, Sekenfeld, the tenderness of the image as of a mother tenderly cradling her precious newborn should not be lost. Naomi, against all her expectations, is pictured at the last in such a pose. Her empty arms are now full. The women of the neighborhood gave him a name, that is the baby, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." They named him Obed, and he became the father of Jesse, the father of David. David, King David. Um, if you were to turn to the first chapter of Matthew's gospel, you would pick up the genealogy of Jesus as it then plays out at the end of Ruth. We almost need to read those two together. When you go to bed tonight, there's probably nothing that'll put you to sleep faster than reading a genealogy. But in Matthew's genealogy, there's something very unique, very special. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I just want to bear with me for a while I lift up 5 names, 5 very special names. Genealogies always list the men, okay? And so we're used to hearing this. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Judah. There's no mention there of Sarah or Rebecca or Rachel or Leah. But listen on. Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, and Judah the father of Perez and Zerah by Tamar. Again, Tamar is named as a woman who in Genesis is more righteous than Judah. Again, another story if you want to pick that up. And Perez the father of Hezron, and Hezron the father of Aram, and Aram the father of Amminadab, and Amminadab the father of Nahshon, and Nahshon the father of Salmon, and Salmon the father of Boaz by Rahab. So Boaz is named in the genealogy, but her mother, Rahab, the prostitute in Jericho, is also named. And Boaz, the father of Obed by Ruth. Ruth's name appears in Jesus' genealogy. So we've got Tamar, we've got Rahab, we've got Ruth. And why are these women being named when all of the other women, the other moms that are a part of this important genealogy remain on? Because they're special. There's something unique in their story, gritty in their story. They are examples of human ingenuity and strength and perseverance. Obed, the father of Jesse, and Jesse, the father of King David. And David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah, the Hittite, Bathsheba, and Solomon, the father of Rehoboam, and so forth. There's the fourth woman. Also, a story of scandal, and even when David sees Bathsheba bathing and says, I want her, and has his soldiers go get her. Let's not kid ourselves. This isn't a consensual relationship. This is essentially a person in a position of power using his power to his advantage, but also a powerful story of redemption and hope, too. So Bathsheba isn't actually named. It's the wife of Uriah, but we all know who Matthew is referring to. And that carries on. And I'll skip over a bunch of that genealogy. If you're having problems sleeping tonight, you can turn to Matthew and read it yourself. But Eliud, the father of Eleazar, Eleazar, the father of Mathan, and Mathan, the father of Jacob, and Jacob, the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, the fifth and perhaps most remarkable woman of them all, the Virgin. consented to conceive of Jesus. Joseph, the husband of Mary, whom Jesus was born and who is called the Messiah. So, why are these five women named, particularly the foreign women who occur later or earlier in the genealogy? Here's my belief. Matthew is making a theological statement here that Jesus' salvation is for the world. John's gospel will say, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him may not perish." And he'll do that in much more flowery terminology. Matthew's genealogy is much more understated, but I think is saying the same thing. That Jesus is being born into the world to be the redeemer of the Moabites and the people of Rahab and Tamar and others that are often, or the Hittites, Uriah via Bathsheba, that the blood that Jesus will spill for the world, Jesus gets from the world. And that salvation is indeed, for God so loved the world that he gives his only Son, because he's not just a child of Jerusalem or the Jews, he's a child of the world. Wonderful story, a wonderful story of redemption, and thank you for hanging with me here over the last 8 to 9 weeks as we've walked through that. This will be downloaded and put on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page for you to revisit if you wish. Thanks, and let's close with a word of prayer. Gracious and holy God, we give you thanks for redeemers, for those who come into our world in meaningful ways, fathers and mothers, those who are adopted, that care and take children in their arms. We thank you in this time for those who keep us safe, for doctors and epidemiologists and firefighters and law enforcement personnel. Be with them, those who stand watch. We ask, just as the communities and the kingdoms of Moab and Israel, Jews and Moabites, that those tensions found hope in Ruth and Naomi's story, that those places where we are divided by race or by culture, that you might bring people into the gaps, into the relationships of love, where we can see across our distance and find hope. Be with us this night and the nights to come, as we search for hope, finding the story of Ruth to be a candle in the night and a light for our pathway ahead. I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you. Thanks for being a part of these Bible studies, and take care. Have a good night.